Black woman loses job after saving injured millionaire. Next day, 2 helicopters land at her house. The hum of the fluorescent lights in the Santa Clara hospital lobby was drowned out by the sharp, unforgiving voice of Director Thomas Whitman. "You're fired, Dr. Diana, and please leave your coat and badge on the table now." His words cut through the crowded lobby, drawing the eyes of every patient and staff member present. The weight of the humiliation was unbearable, yet Diana Santos, 38, stood still, her dark eyes cool and unwavering. This wasn't how she imagined her career would end, being escorted out of the hospital she had served with pride for over a decade. As head nurse, Diana had poured herself into her work, saving countless lives, building relationships with patients, and earning the respect of most of her colleagues. But today, everything she had worked for seemed to vanish in an instant. Whitman's anger was palpable, his face reddening with each word. "Serious violation of hospital protocol," he continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "Unauthorized treatment. Use of medical resources without prior payment." Diana's hands tightened at her sides as he spat the words with disdain, each syllable meant to break her spirit. She had heard the whispers in the hallways, the murmurs about her being too ambitious, too vocal, but she never imagined they would come to this. "People like you need to learn their place in this institution," Whitman sneered, his eyes flicking to the crowd of onlookers, clearly relishing the moment. Diana stood tall, despite the rising tide of anger within her. "Director Whitman," she began, her voice calm, "I saved a man's life last night. A man who arrived here bleeding, unconscious, with no identification and no insurance." Whitman scoffed, cutting her off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "No insurance, no treatment," he snapped, glaring at her as if her actions were an unforgivable transgression. The memory of the previous night hit Diana in waves. It was nearly midnight when the automatic doors of the emergency room had slid open. A man had staggered inside, his clothes torn and bloodied, his face smeared with dirt and crimson. He collapsed before anyone could react. "Please help," were his only words before he lost consciousness. The night receptionist, Patricia, who was more interested in her cell phone than in the patient she was supposed to be serving, barely glanced up. "No insurance, no treatment," she muttered, barely audible. But Diana didn't hesitate. Her years of experience kicked in. She saw the man's pulse was weak, his breathing irregular. Without even thinking, she leapt into action. "Call Dr. Martinez. Prepare emergency room 3, she ordered, her voice steady, cutting through the tension that hung thick in the air. "But Dr. Diana, the rules," Patricia began to protest, but Diana silenced her with a firm wave of her hand. "To hell with the rules," she said, her eyes fixed on the dying man. "This man is dying, and I'm not going to stand by while that happens." As Diana handed her badge to the security guard, the weight of her decision crashed down on her. The security guard, a man named Johnson who had always greeted her with respect, now looked away in embarrassment as he walked her out of the hospital. "You'll regret this, Whitman," Diana said quietly, though there was no anger in her voice, just a quiet, certain resolve. Whitman laughed, a loud, unpleasant sound that filled the space. "The only thing you saved was some homeless bum," he sneered. "Now get out of here before I call the police." Diana walked through the revolving doors for the last time, the cold air outside a sharp contrast to the warmth she had once felt within the hospital. She looked around, feeling the sting of betrayal, but then something unusual caught her eye. The homeless man who usually stood on the corner outside the hospital was absent. In his place, standing with an air of quiet authority, was a man in an expensive suit, talking intently on a high-end cell phone. What no one in the hospital could have imagined, least of all Diana, was that the homeless man she had just saved was wearing a $300,000 Patek Philippe watch, hidden under the grime and blood, and that at that very moment, while she was being humiliated, something entirely unexpected was unfolding in the background. The morning after her humiliating dismissal, Diana stood in her modest kitchen, her hands trembling as she processed everything that had happened. The contrast between her humble riverside neighborhood and the upscale area where Santa Clara Hospital was located couldn't have been starker. But it was here, in the simplicity of her small kitchen, that Diana made a decision that would change her life forever. Her phone buzzed with 3 missed calls from an unknown number. She had been too overwhelmed to check them, but on the 4th call, she finally answered. "Dr. Diana Santos, this is Thomas Reynolds, corporate lawyer for Reynolds and Associates. We need to talk urgently about the patient you treated last night. Corporate lawyer? Diana's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the chill of anxiety creeping up her spine. If this was about a lawsuit, she wasn't prepared for it. If this is about a lawsuit, Diana said cautiously, I was just doing my job. Reynolds' voice was calm, yet urgent. On the contrary, Dr. Santos, he said. The man you saved, well, let's just say your actions have consequences that go far beyond what you can imagine. Diana's mind raced. She couldn't fathom what kind of consequences he was referring to. Can we meet in an hour? Reynolds asked. At the downtown coffee shop, bustling with hurried executives, Diana entered, now wearing her hospital uniform but without the lab coat that had once symbolized her role as head nurse. She spotted Reynolds sitting at the back, and as she approached, he slid a tablet toward her. The man you saved, he said, his tone measured, is Vincent Montenegro, CEO of Montenegro Holdings, one of the largest healthcare corporations in the country. Diana froze. The face on the screen was the same one she had cleaned of blood and mud the night before. The man she had saved, who had been dressed like a beggar, was now clean, composed, and dressed in expensive attire. Vincent has this peculiar habit of hiking alone, without security, to clear his mind, Reynolds continued. Yesterday, he suffered a serious accident in the mountains. He tried to make his way to the nearest hospital, yours. Diana's heart raced as the pieces slowly began to fit together. Meanwhile, back at Santa Clara Hospital, Whitman had called an emergency meeting with the entire staff. He relished the chance to remind them of their place in his hospital. This is an example of what happens when employees forget their place, Whitman's voice boomed, full of self-satisfaction. He continued, Diana Santos has been fired for violating our policies. I hope everyone understands the message. Patricia, the receptionist, clapped quietly. But among the crowd, Dr. Martinez, the only Latino doctor on staff, remained silent, his fists clenched under the table. As Diana sat in the coffee shop, still reeling from the revelation of Vincent Montenegro's true identity, she couldn't help but think that this was only the beginning. What she had done wasn't just about saving one life, it was about standing up for something much bigger. And soon, she would discover that her decision would not only change her life but shake the very foundations of the hospital and the elitist system that had kept people like her in their place for far too long. The sun had barely risen the next morning, but Diana was already awake, pacing in her modest riverside home, the weight of her recent humiliation still heavy on her shoulders. She hadn't been able to sleep much, her mind racing through the events of the past 24 hours. Her thoughts kept returning to Vincent Montenegro, the man she had saved. The revelation that he was not just a homeless man, but the CEO of one of the largest healthcare corporations in the country was dizzying. Her phone buzzed again, shaking her from her thoughts. It was another call from Thomas Reynolds. Dr. Santos, I hope you're doing well, Reynolds said, his voice as professional as ever. I'd like to meet you again, but this time, I'm afraid it's not for just a chat. We need to strategize about what comes next. What do you mean? Diana asked, a chill of concern creeping into her voice. It's not just about a lawsuit anymore, Diana. Montenegro is furious, on your behalf. He told me everything, how he was treated at Santa Clara, how you risked your career to save him, and how Whitman humiliated you yesterday. Diana couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Montenegro wanted to help her? But what could that possibly mean? He wants to ensure that this doesn't go unnoticed, Diana. But we need to act carefully. Whitman is too well-connected. We can't just sue him, we need to hit him where it hurts. Reynolds' tone was grave. Diana felt a knot form in her stomach. She was just a nurse, a woman with a decent job, a modest home, and a heart full of compassion. But now, she was part of something much bigger than herself. She needed to prepare for what was coming. The coffee shop where they had agreed to meet was crowded with busy professionals, the hum of conversation blending with the sound of coffee machines and the clink of cups. Diana entered, her eyes scanning the room for Reynolds. When she spotted him, she walked toward the back of the cafe, her heart pounding in her chest. Reynolds stood and offered a brief nod before gesturing for Diana to sit. He was dressed sharply, his black suit impeccable, yet something about the way he spoke hinted at a deeper purpose. He wasn't just a corporate lawyer. He was a man with a mission. "The man you saved last night," he began, pushing a tablet toward her. "This is Vincent Montenegro, CEO of Montenegro Holdings. He's made his fortune in healthcare, and now he's using that power to do something that can change everything." Diana's heart raced as she looked at the image on the screen. It was Vincent's professional photo, polished and perfect. The same face she had cleaned of blood and dirt just hours ago, now presented as a corporate giant. "You've got to be kidding me," Diana muttered, barely able to believe what she was hearing. "The homeless man was him?" Reynolds nodded. "Yes. He was on a solo hiking trip, and after the accident, he tried to get to your hospital. He knows how you were treated. He's furious, not with you, but with the hospital and Whitman. He wants to make things right, but we need to act strategically." Diana shook her head, trying to process it all. "I just did what anyone would have done. I didn't think this was going to turn into some corporate scandal." "Diana," Reynolds said gently, "sometimes doing the right thing sets off a chain of events you can't control. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't act. Montenegro has the power to go after Whitman and Santa Clara Hospital, but he needs a plan." Meanwhile, back at Santa Clara, Whitman was reveling in his perceived victory. The staff meeting he had called after Diana's dismissal was a testament to his thirst for control. His voice thundered through the meeting room as he addressed the employees with a smirk on his face. "This is an example of what happens when employees forget their place," Whitman proclaimed, looking around at the gathered staff, his eyes cold and calculating. "Diana Santos has been fired for violating our policies. I hope everyone understands the message." Patricia, the receptionist who had done nothing but sit behind her desk and swipe on her phone while Diana saved the man's life, gave a quiet applause. It was half-hearted, but it was enough to please Whitman, who basked in the moment of triumph. However, not all of the employees were willing to stay silent. Dr. Martinez, the only Latino doctor on the staff, remained stoic, his fists clenched under the table. He knew the truth, but fear kept him from speaking out. Whitman continued, clearly enjoying the power he held over the room. "We must make an example out of her. We can't have people like her undermining the institution. Let this be a lesson." But in the shadows of that meeting, things were already starting to move. An investigation had quietly begun. The quiet murmur of change had begun, and there was no stopping it now. Diana's life over the next few days became a blur of uncertainty and mounting bills. Her dismissal from Santa Clara was a blow she hadn't anticipated, but she was far from broken. The calls from Montenegro's lawyer grew more frequent, and as she sat in her modest kitchen, Diana took another call. This time, it was from a familiar face, security guard Johnson. "Dr. Diana," he said in a low voice, "I've got something you need to see. Camera recordings. Whitman didn't know the system records audio too. You need to hear this." Diana's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Johnson's voice became even more urgent. "I've got footage of Whitman talking about you. He called you an arrogant black woman, and he was looking for any excuse to get rid of you. I've got it all, and I'm sending it to you now. This could be what you need to take him down." Diana could hardly believe what she was hearing. But there was no denying it. Whitman had already dug his own grave. As the investigation into Whitman's actions gained momentum, the legal team from Montenegro Holdings worked tirelessly behind the scenes. They were uncovering a disturbing pattern of discrimination at Santa Clara Hospital, turning away patients of color, especially those without premium insurance. The evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and discrimination was mounting, and soon it would all come to light. In the midst of all this, Diana received a cruel message from Patricia. It was a post on Facebook with a picture of Diana from the night she had been humiliated, captioned with a dismissive comment. "Some people need to learn that rules are there for a reason. #Justice served." It had 47 likes, most from the hospital administration. But in the midst of the bitterness, there was a flicker of support. Diana's eyes landed on a private message from Johnson. "Dr. Diana, I've got your back. You're not alone in this. I'm sending you something, evidence that will help you. Hang in there." As Diana watched the message come through, She felt a sense of gratitude and, for the first time in days, a small spark of hope. Meanwhile, Montenegro, still recovering in a luxury hospital suite, was not idle. He was personally coordinating every step of the investigation, making sure every detail was carefully examined. His personal commitment to bringing Whitman down was unwavering. "I want to know everything about Whitman," he ordered his team. "Every patient he's turned away, every case of discrimination, every penny he's stolen. We need proof." And they were finding it. It wasn't just about one man's humiliation. It was about the rot at the core of the entire system, a system that valued profit over human lives. As Diana navigated the emotional storm of being wronged, she couldn't have known how close she was to witnessing a dramatic shift that would bring everything she had suffered back into focus. The pieces were falling into place. Montenegro's power, combined with the evidence and the support of people like Johnson, was creating a perfect storm. The days following the quiet but powerful movements behind the scenes felt like a blur for Diana. Her phone buzzed constantly with updates, most from Thomas Reynolds, others from Montenegro's team, as the investigation into Santa Clara Hospital and Whitman's actions gathered steam. But despite the avalanche of information, there was one constant in her life. Diana remained resolute. The humiliation from her firing still stung, but each piece of evidence, every phone call, and every small victory in her fight against the system gave her renewed strength. One evening, as Diana sat in her small kitchen, the phone rang again. It was Thomas Reynolds. "Dr. Santos," his voice was urgent but controlled, "I need you to listen carefully. The investigation is moving faster than we anticipated. We have enough evidence now to make a move against Whitman, but there's something bigger happening here. It's time to act." Diana sat up straighter, her pulse quickening. "What do you mean by act? What are you asking me to do?" "I'm asking you to take control of the narrative," Reynolds said. "Whitman thinks he's still in charge, that this will all blow over. But what if we flipped that on him? What if we took everything to the public, exposed everything he's been hiding, and did it in a way that leaves him with no escape?" Diana knew what he was suggesting. It wasn't just about suing Whitman anymore. It was about a full-on attack, one that would take down the entire corrupt system. She paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I've already lost my job," she said softly, but with fierce determination. "What's left to lose?" Reynolds chuckled darkly. "Exactly. And we've got one more thing in our favor, Montenegro." Diana had been hearing a lot about Vincent Montenegro in recent days. The CEO of Montenegro Holdings had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, gathering information about Whitman's corrupt practices and using his corporate connections to apply pressure where it would hurt most. His involvement was more than just a generous gesture. It was a strategic move to expose the deeper rot within the healthcare system. "He's with you, Diana," Reynolds continued. "And we're going to make sure the world knows what's been happening inside Santa Clara. But we need to act fast. We're setting up a meeting with some of the hospital's biggest investors. Once we have them on our side, we go public." Diana took a deep breath. "Let's do it." In the meantime, back at Santa Clara Hospital, Whitman remained confident. He had no idea that the walls were slowly closing in around him. As he mingled with investors and politicians at a charity dinner, savoring his perceived success, he couldn't have been further from the truth. In the glittering ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel, Whitman raised his glass for a toast to his successes. His smile was wide, his voice booming with arrogance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "Santa Clara Hospital has posted record profits this quarter. We've proven that quality medicine and profitability can go hand in hand. I am proud to say that we've eliminated the problem elements and increased our margins by 15% this month." The crowd applauded, the clinking of champagne glasses filling the air, but none of them knew that what they were applauding was built on lies, discrimination, and the exploitation of the most vulnerable. As Whitman continued his speech, a small team of hackers working for Montenegro's legal team was preparing for their next move. They had infiltrated the event's audiovisual system and had just enough time to implement their plan before Whitman's speech reached its peak. Whitman was halfway through his speech when the giant screens on either side of the ballroom flickered. The video that had been prepared to glorify the hospital's achievements suddenly cut out, and the image of Whitman, smiling smugly, was replaced by a security camera recording from Santa Clara Hospital. The room fell silent as the screen showed Whitman's own words. "That arrogant black woman needs to learn her place," Whitman's voice echoed through the hall. "I've been looking for a reason to get rid of her for a long time. She saved a beggar. Perfect." The room shifted uncomfortably. Gasps echoed through the crowd, but it was only the beginning. The video continued with shocking clarity, exposing more of Whitman's private comments, including his blatant discrimination against Black and Latino patients and his casual admission to systematic embezzlement at the hospital. The footage didn't stop there. It revealed falsified medical records, spreadsheets showing the misappropriation of funds, and emails that tied Whitman's political connections to a series of financial scandals. The final blow came when a new voice filled the room, one that everyone in the crowd recognized. "My name is Vincent Montenegro," the recording began, "and I was the man Dr. Diana Santos saved the night before." Whitman's face turned an ashen shade as Montenegro's voice continued. "If it weren't for Dr. Santos, I wouldn't be here today," Montenegro said. "I was denied treatment at Santa Clara Hospital due to my lack of proper insurance. Dr. Santos risked her career to save me. She deserves your respect, not your humiliation." Whitman tried to turn towards the exit, but he was blocked by security. Federal agents, who had been waiting for just this moment, stepped forward, their badges shining as they surrounded him. "Thomas Whitman," one agent said, his voice cold, "you are under arrest for fraud, institutional discrimination, and embezzlement of public funds." Whitman's face contorted with disbelief. His empire of lies and power was crumbling before his very eyes. At the same time, Diana stood in the back of the ballroom, her heart racing as she watched the unfolding drama. Behind her, Vincent Montenegro stood tall, a calm confidence radiating from him. He had done what was necessary to ensure the truth was brought to light. As Whitman was escorted away, his face a mask of fury and desperation, Diana stepped forward, the spotlight now on her. The crowd parted to make way for her, and as she walked toward the stage, the room erupted in applause. The spotlight that had once illuminated Whitman's arrogance now shone on the true heroine of the evening. Diana stood before the microphone, her voice steady but full of emotion as she spoke to the crowd. "For 10 years, Diana began, her voice resonating throughout the room, "I watched people die because they didn't have the right credit card. I saw talented colleagues fired for being the wrong color. I was publicly humiliated for doing my job, saving lives." Her words filled the room, the weight of her experience and her courage evident in every syllable. The applause grew louder, and Diana felt a sense of vindication wash over her. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. "I stand here tonight," Diana continued, "not because I want to make an example of anyone, but because I want to ensure that what happened to me never happens again. I want a world where every life has equal value, regardless of the color of your skin or the size of your bank account." As Diana spoke, a revolution was quietly unfolding across the nation. Her actions, her bravery, and her fight for justice had ignited something much bigger than herself. The scandal surrounding Santa Clara Hospital had sparked a national conversation about healthcare inequality, discrimination, and the price people were forced to pay for basic care. The hashtag Justice for Diana was trending worldwide, and the momentum was undeniable. What had started as an act of kindness, a decision to save a life, was now changing the future of healthcare. The following days after the public reveal were a whirlwind of chaos for Thomas Whitman. His world, which had once been fortified by power, corruption, and influence, now lay in ruins. The media storm that followed the live broadcast of his arrest was relentless. Headlines screamed across every major outlet: healthcare tycoon arrested for discrimination and fraud, Santa Clara Hospital's corruption exposed, and CEO's greed led to the death of thousands. But the most impactful headline was the one that flashed across screens everywhere: Dr. Diana Santos, the woman who saved more than a life. For Diana, however, the struggle was far from over. While Whitman's arrest was a victory, it was just the beginning of the real battle. The hospital's operations had been heavily compromised, but the ripples of injustice were still being felt across the healthcare industry. Despite the headlines, Diana stayed grounded. She had a new mission now, a mission to ensure that the horrors she had witnessed were never repeated. The momentum of her fight against Whitman's system had only grown, and she found herself not only fighting for justice for the patients she had once served, but for the soul of the healthcare system itself. As the dust settled in the wake of Whitman's arrest, Diana was thrust into the spotlight in a way she had never imagined. The calls came pouring in, media outlets, advocacy groups, even politicians wanting to meet with her. Yet, Diana remained focused on one thing: building something new, something that would embody her vision for a fair, compassionate healthcare system. Montenegro, having seen the power of what Diana had done, was fully committed to helping her create a model for universal healthcare. He had begun taking steps to acquire Santa Clara Hospital, a move that would allow him to implement the changes they had discussed in their strategy sessions. Diana was hesitant at first, unsure about stepping into the world of corporate healthcare, but Montenegro's words reassured her. "We're not just changing a hospital," Montenegro had said when they met in his office, a luxurious suite with a sweeping view of the city. "We're changing the way people think about healthcare. You've inspired something bigger than yourself, Diana. Let's make sure it lasts." Montenegro's resources, combined with Diana's passion, could change everything. The vision was simple: universal care for everyone, regardless of their socio-economic background. But the road to implementation would not be easy. Diana was appointed as the new medical director for the revamped Santa Clara Hospital, now to be rebranded under a new name: the Diana Santos Health Center for Universal Care. It was an ironic twist of fate. A hospital once controlled by corporate greed was now in the hands of the very woman who had risked it all to save one life. And with her leadership, a new era for the healthcare facility was beginning. The building itself underwent a massive transformation. The sterile, cold atmosphere that once defined Santa Clara was replaced with bright, welcoming spaces designed to make every patient feel valued. Walls that had once echoed with the whisper of discrimination now resonated with the sounds of laughter and healing. The waiting rooms were no longer places of anxiety, but rather spaces of comfort for patients who had long been neglected. In a bold move, Diana also pushed for a scholarship program aimed at helping underrepresented minority students pursue careers in medicine. Her focus on diversity in the medical field was not just symbolic. It was about creating a pipeline of compassionate, skilled healthcare professionals who could reshape the future of healthcare for marginalized communities. It didn't take long for the success of Diana's new program to make waves. Stories of the transformation of Santa Clara Hospital began circulating in the press, and soon, health professionals from around the country were visiting to see how the Diana Santos model could be implemented in their own institutions. The attention came with its own set of challenges, of course. As Santa Clara Hospital's reputation grew, so did the scrutiny. Former colleagues and patients whose lives Diana had touched sent messages of gratitude, but there were also those who questioned her sudden rise to prominence. Former patients and staff members from the old Santa Clara made their voices heard, sharing stories of how the hospital had once denied care to the very people it was meant to serve. On a quiet afternoon, as Diana sat in her new office overlooking the bustling city below, her phone rang again. It was a call from her old colleague, Dr. Martinez, the Latino doctor who had remained silent during Whitman's reign. "Dr. Santos," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. I should have stood up with you all those years." Diana smiled softly, a sense of peace washing over her. "It's never too late, Dr. Martinez. You're here now. That's what matters." Their conversation turned to the future of Santa Clara, and together, they brainstormed ways to continue improving care for those who had been overlooked for so long. It was clear that Diana's fight was just beginning, but this time, she wasn't alone. She had an entire team of like-minded professionals supporting her vision for a healthcare system that would serve everyone, no matter their background. The grand opening of the Diana Santos Health Center was a star-studded event, attracting dignitaries from across the country, healthcare professionals, and media outlets. The ballroom, once the site of Whitman's arrogant speeches, was now filled with hope and anticipation. As Diana took the stage to address the crowd, the applause was deafening. Her speech was brief but powerful. "When I was fired from my job, I thought it was the end," Diana began, her voice strong. "But I've learned that sometimes the universe takes us out of the wrong place to put us exactly where we should be." The audience was riveted as Diana continued, speaking from the heart about her experiences in the healthcare system and the need for compassion above all else. As she looked out into the crowd, she saw not just healthcare professionals, but everyday people who had come to support her mission. People who had been denied care, who had been treated as less than human, and who now had a chance at something better. "This hospital," Diana continued, is a symbol of what's possible when we choose justice over profit. It's a reminder that no matter who you are, where you come from, or how much money you have, you deserve to be treated with dignity. Healthcare isn't a privilege, it's a right. As Diana finished her speech, the crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation, a resounding show of support for the work she had begun. The media cameras flashed, capturing the moment for the world to see. #JusticeForDiana had become more than just a hashtag, it had become a movement. Months passed, and the Diana Santos Health Center began receiving accolades for its success. The anonymous donations continued to pour in, millions of dollars to fund its programs. The scholarship fund for underrepresented medical students grew, and soon, doctors from every background came to train at Santa Clara, eager to learn from Diana's approach. Meanwhile, Thomas Whitman, once at the peak of his power, sat in a federal prison cell, his empire in ruins. He had been sentenced to 15 years for fraud, discrimination, and embezzlement. His ex-wife had filed for divorce in the first week after his arrest, and his children had legally changed their last name. His political connections evaporated, and his fortune was gone. In prison, Whitman had nothing but time to reflect on his downfall. Every day was a reminder of how quickly the mighty could fall. But as Diana stood at the opening ceremony for the Diana Santos Health Center, she knew that justice had been served, not through vengeance, but through the power of compassion and integrity. Her work was just beginning, and the world was watching. A year had passed since the grand opening of the Diana Santos Health Center, and the transformation was undeniable. The center had become a beacon of hope in a healthcare system that had long been tainted by greed and discrimination. Diana's model of universal care, founded on principles of equality and dignity for all patients, had already saved countless lives and inspired a movement that stretched across the country. Diana herself had become a symbol of resilience, integrity, and justice. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a pioneer, a leader in a healthcare revolution that was spreading far beyond the walls of Santa Clara. The Diana Santos Health Center was growing, and the impact of her work was felt in hospitals and clinics across the nation. The press continued to follow her every move, and news of her success was making headlines worldwide. Universities, hospitals, and even government agencies sought her expertise, eager to implement her model of care. Diana's phone was constantly buzzing with invitations to conferences, lectures, and meetings with influential people eager to bring her vision to life. But despite the fame and attention, Diana remained focused on the mission that had driven her from the beginning: to ensure that every person, regardless of their background or financial status, had access to the care they deserved. One evening, as Diana walked through the brightly lit hallways of her health center, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. The walls were adorned with photographs of patients, faces of all ages, ethnicities, and backgrounds. These were the people she had fought for, and now, they had a place where they could receive care without judgment. "Dr. Santos," a voice called out. Diana turned to find Maria Gonzalez, the bilingual nurse who had been fired from Santa Clara and now worked at the front desk of the center. Maria was smiling, holding a clipboard filled with patient information. "We've just received another anonymous donation. $5 million this time." Diana's heart swelled with gratitude. "$5 million," she repeated, incredulously. "Who's sending all this money?" Maria shrugged with a grin. "Does it really matter? What matters is that we're growing, and people believe in what we're doing here." Diana nodded, her mind racing. The donations were coming in fast, and they were all traceable, thanks to Montenegro's careful oversight. The funds were being used to expand the center's reach, to provide more resources, to hire more staff, and to offer even more scholarships to minority students pursuing careers in medicine. It was a ripple effect that was starting to spread nationwide. "This is just the beginning," Diana said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to build a network of health centers like this one. We need to make sure that no one is ever turned away again." Meanwhile, across the country, Thomas Whitman was discovering the true meaning of humility. The once powerful CEO, who had enjoyed a life of luxury and influence, was now serving a 15-year prison sentence. The luxury suite he had once called home had been replaced with the grim reality of a federal prison cell. His name was no longer recognized with reverence. It was a punchline, a symbol of corruption and abuse. In his cell, Whitman's days were long and filled with regret. He had spent his life building an empire on lies, discrimination, and exploitation. Now, he had nothing but time to reflect on his mistakes. One day, as he sat in the prison's common room, the door to his cell opened, and a guard entered. The guard didn't say anything at first. He just placed an envelope on the table in front of Whitman. Whitman glanced up, his heart racing. "Who's this from?" he asked. "It's from Johnson," the guard said. "Your former security guard. He's gone on to work for someone different." Whitman frowned. "Johnson? What does he want with me?" The guard left without answering, leaving Whitman to open the envelope. Inside, he found a photo of the new Diana Santos Health Center, with a New York Times article folded underneath. The headline read, "Formerly Discriminatory Hospital Transformed by Compassionate Leader, Dr. Diana Santos." Whitman felt a pang of frustration as he stared at the article. He had tried to break Diana, tried to humiliate her for doing the right thing, but now, here she was, leading a nationwide movement to change healthcare, while he rotted in prison. The accompanying note was simple. "You had your chance to change. Diana Santos took hers and changed everything. You'll never see the world the way she does. And that's why she won." Back at the Diana Santos Health Center, a momentous ceremony was being planned. It was a year since the center's grand opening, and now, Diana was being invited to speak at an international conference in Washington, D.C. The conference would showcase her work and offer her a platform to spread her vision for universal health care even further. On the day of the ceremony, Diana stood backstage, looking out at the large auditorium filled with healthcare professionals, politicians, and activists. Her heart swelled with pride, not for herself, but for the thousands of lives her work had touched. As she stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. Diana paused for a moment, soaking in the support, before she began to speak. "When I was fired from Santa Clara Hospital, I thought it was the end," Diana began, her voice steady. "But I've learned that sometimes, the universe takes us out of the wrong place to put us exactly where we need to be." She paused again, her eyes scanning the room. "I stand here today not because I want recognition, but because I want to make sure that no one else is ever turned away from healthcare. That no one else has to beg for the care they need because they don't have the right insurance or the right skin color. That's the future I'm working toward. And with all of you here today, I know we can make it happen." The applause that followed was deafening, and Diana couldn't help but smile as she looked out at the faces in the crowd. These were the people who were going to help her make healthcare accessible to everyone, regardless of their background. These were the people who believed in compassion over profit, and together, they would change the world. 6 months later, Diana was back in her new office at the Diana Santos Health Center. The renovations were complete, and the waiting list for appointments had grown to over 1,000 people. Diana's model was being studied at universities, and her work was becoming the gold standard for compassionate healthcare. "Dr. Santos," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Johnson, now the head of security at the center. He looked even more polished than before, his uniform neat and crisp. "We've got an issue," Johnson said, his expression serious. Diana raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" "We're receiving more requests for our model. Other hospitals want to adopt it. People are calling it the Diana Santos model." He smiled. "It's spreading, Dr. Santos. You're not just changing one hospital anymore." Diana smiled back, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. "That's exactly what we want. Let's make sure it spreads even further." As Diana looked around the center, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had created something that would outlive her, something that would forever change the way healthcare was viewed. It wasn't just about saving lives, it was about creating a world where every life mattered, where compassion was at the core of everything they did. In the federal prison, Thomas Whitman sat alone in his cell, counting the days. He had lost everything: the power, the wealth, the influence. But most importantly, he had lost his chance to be a part of something good. Diana had shown the world that true greatness didn't come from money or status, it came from compassion. And while Whitman rotted in prison, Diana Santos's legacy was just beginning. Her work would continue to inspire, to change, and to heal, for years to come.